motto as we get started. Ready, Brother Malik?
Well, he's
Wanna-
at the,
You
he's at the
caught me
baseball
walking back
game.
to my. Yeah, I'm at the baseball game. I'm trying to get somewhere
Oh,
quiet.
yeah, don't worry. Don't worry. Brother Art, I didn't know. Sorry about that. Brother Art, you want to do the motto, get us going today? Okay, Brother John.
Sure. If everyone would put the black fist in there, repeat after me. One God,
One God,
one aim,
one aim,
one destiny.
one destiny.
Thank you. Meeting officially open.
Okay. Greetings. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the call. Tonight, we are continuing our study of Race First by Tony Martin. And we've been reviewing some questions of the early chapters. And tonight, we're going to continue with our reading so we can kind of keep up with the pace for the course. And I believe we had read up to chapter 3. I know it says chapter 5, but I believe we had read up to 3. I'm not sure if we did 4. I think we're on 4 and 5, Brother John. Did we already do 4?
We read 3. We should be on chapter 4.
Right. So we will try to do 4 and possibly 5, depending on how quickly we get through that. And then we'll just jump into questions for next week and get caught up. If no one wants to volunteer to start, we can wait till the Brother John puts the chapter up. And we'll go ahead and greetings, Brother Emotep. Welcome. And
Habari Ghani Africans.
greetings. Welcome to the call. Okay.
Jumbo.
We could move the bar or make it vertical. I mean horizontal, so it's not covering up any of the verbiage. When you get a chance, Brother John, we can probably move it over to the left side.
You're talking about this bar with the books and stuff?
Yes. Is there a way to put it on the left or horizontally? As it nips off a little piece of the word. But if it's not possible,
Yeah, I think this is about as good as
okay,
we can.
awesome.
That's actually better than I knew we could do.
So I would like to open the floor for a volunteer if anyone wants to read chapter 4 on religion. If not,
Uh,
I'll read it.
yeah, Sister Diane, I feel like I do enough talking throughout the week. I'd rather not. Just wanna-
Okay, I'll do it. Okay. All right, so if I don't have anyone who wants to knock the door down to read, I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and read it. So we're doing chapter 4, entitled Religion. And we'll start out with a quote by Marcus Garvey. It says, "God in the affairs of man is on the side of the strongest battalion." Marcus Garvey. And then another quote by S.U. Smith, treasurer. He said, "In spite of all the evidence, Negroes still believe that Garvey is not dead. What is wrong? Was he immortal? Was he not human and subjected to sickness and death like the rest of us?" And that's the Jamaica treasurer. So in March 1917, the Chicago-based Champion magazine editorialized on the need for a religion that would inspire the Black man to do for himself. It noted that from a secular standpoint, both Booker T. Washington and Dr. Du Bois was, with their different schools of thought, supplied it. Nonetheless, the article continued, "Such faith do not penetrate so deeply into the nature of a man as those inspired by his spiritual self." The editorial continued with an impassioned plea. "The Negro is crying for a Muhammad, a prophet, to come forth and give him the Quran of economic and intellectual welfare. Where is he?" An article by Garvey had appeared in this magazine 2 months earlier, and within the next 2 years, he would be on his way towards answering this plea. Garvey seemed to have had frequent contact with religion during his early years. At the age of 7, he is supposed to have enjoyed affecting the role of preacher among his playmates. As a boy, too, he pumped the organ in the Wesleyan Methodist Church in St. Ann's Bay, Jamaica, the church to which his parents belonged. Garvey later converted to Catholicism, which did not deter him from following an independent line in things religious. Like many of the world's great revolutionaries and reformers, Garvey dreamed dreams, saw visions, and long before his dreams assumed worldwide importance, he was imbued with a self-conscious premonition of impending greatness. This phenomena, coupled with his fascination for religion and religious ritual, gave his career a messianic quality which he himself was not reluctant to express. He was not loath to compare his own career to that of Jesus Christ. In doing so, however, he was attempting to recapture what he considered to be the progress and revolutionary essence of the early Christian church. As far as he was concerned, Christ was the leader of a mass movement for the uplift of oppressed people, and so was he. This explains why he could pro-religious and very often anti-clerical at the same time. This explains why he could be pro-religious and very often anti-clerical at the same time. Christ's doctrine, he explained, was simple but revolutionary. He laid the foundation of a pure democracy and established a fact, not a theory, of the universal brotherhood of man. And just as he saw himself in the role of Messiah, so he saw his doctrine of Black nationalism as one that would survive and thrive even in the face of persecution. A favorite poetic quotation of UNIA orators was the line, "Truth crushed to earth shall rise again." This spiritual aspect of Garvey's movement distinguished it from the more important contemporary movement with similar goals. The universal feeling of oppression and resentment experienced by Black people at their worldwide subjection to colonialism and oppression cannot be overemphasized. Garvey's uncanny ability to encompass all this worldwide racial sentiment and the spectacular success with which he channeled it into organizational form released emotions of hope and aspiration among Black people which knew no bounds. Garvey's followers and admirers regularly hailed him as the mightiest prophet who has appeared among us in 50 years, a great religious teacher, a John the Baptist. They regularly compared him to Christ. Like Christ, he had been betrayed for money and condemned by governments. And his gospel, too, would be preached to every nation and would precipitate an end to barbarism. One preacher wrote a book wherein he essayed to show that Garvey had brought the race, the UNIA, through the instrumentality of God. Garveyites from Cologne, Panama, seeking their leader's release from prison in the United States, informed President Coolidge that we, the Negro of the world, look upon Garvey as a superman, a demagogue, and as the reincarnated angel of peace come from heaven to dispense political salvation to an oppressed people. Yeah, the message continued. We love Garvey next to God. One New York division went so far as to canonize Garvey in his own lifetime after the expulsion from the United States. This tendency where am I now? Oh, this tendency to apophonize Garvey found expression in the word of the UNIA Creed. We believe in God, the creator of all things, and people, in Jesus Christ, his son, the spiritual savior of mankind. We believe in Marcus Garvey, the leader of the Negro people of the world, and in the program enunciated by him through the UNIA, the redemption of Africa. A similar creed found its way into a nationalist South African church. We believe in one God, maker of all things, father of Ethiopia. We did Antony Marcus Garvey and colleagues come to save the downtrodden children of Ethiopia, that they might raise up to be great power amongst the nation. It was consistent with the veneration that some of Garvey's followers at first refused to believe accounts of his death, due to in part to the fact that the first report of his passing was in fact false, and had to be reassured and had to be reassured that Garvey had indeed passed on, but remained in spirit to share the joy and sorrow of his people. Garvey did not indulge, Garvey did not indulge in religion for its own sake, however, but use it as he did art for furthering his program of race pride and self-reliance. His political use of religion began by the simple argument that if, as established Christian churches preach, a man was made in the image and likeness of God, then black man should depict a God in their own image and likeness, which would inevitably be black. Garvey pointed out that the practice of Western Hemisphere African to worship a god of another race had few parallels anywhere else. It was quite normal for people to visualize and depict their gods in their own color. The foisting of a white god onto a black people was therefore a white distortion. Garvey's close colleague Bishop George McGuire reinforced his argument by pointing out that Christ was historically reddish brown rather than white. And furthermore, should Christ visit New York, he would not be allowed to live on Riverside Drive, but would have to reside in Harlem because of his color. Garvey reinforced this view by the argument that because he came as an embodiment, of all humanity and therefore was colored, Christ was persecuted. This facet of Garvey's thought, like most others, was taken to its logical conclusion at a religious ceremony marking the close of the 1924 International Convention of Negro People of the World. Jesus Christ was canonized as a black man of sorrow and the Virgin Mary as a black Madonna. The convention also agreed to the idealization of God as a Holy Spirit without physical form, but a creature of imaginary substance of the black race, being of like image and likeness. Garvey explained that this did not mean that the UNIA was embarking upon a new religion. It was simply correcting the mistake of centuries. Garvey's black people elicited rebukes from a cross-section of the type of people who oppose his program. The pastor of the St. Philip's Colored Episcopal Church in Harlem considered the idea absurd. Garvey was, in his view, holding the race up to ridicule. One British foreign official considered that this religious program beats the band. Another thought the Bishop McGuire seemed to have got some of his ideas from Chartres. Professor Kelly Miller of Howard University agreed that God was equally as black as he was white, but thought that the remedy did not lie in the vindictive alternative of Marcus Garvey. A correspondence to the New York Times pointed out that Indians and Africans in Brazil had long depicted Christ as black, but minus what he considered Garvey's racial animosity. Since religion for Garvey was eminently political, the black god of UNIA differs from many of the Christian God insofar as he was a God of self-reliance. The God of the UNIA concerned himself with spiritual matters. He endowed all races equally and left them to their own device to solve the problems of survival. It appears as though Garvey, in view of his own religious background and mindful of entrenched position of religious in the lives of Black people, opted to channel this religious fervor into the path of racial salvation rather than attempt to fight it. Therefore, he incessantly repeated the message. We blame God for many things that he didn't even know about. He was convinced that in a thoroughly materialistic world, mere religious prophets would not sway the hearts of those in power. He even jokingly suggested that if he thought religion alone could win justice for the Black man, he would be a bishop. This difference between Garvey's religion and mainstream Christianity was not accidental. He considered white Christianity to be synonymous with hypocrisy and assailed Black people for giving up the world to the white man for the dubious privilege of receiving Jesus. The white man has the world and gives up Jesus. Don't you know that white man has a right to Jesus too? Jesus belongs to everybody, so you are foolish to give up the world and take Jesus only. Accordingly, when during the annual International Convention of 1922 in New York, a white Bible society prestigiously, offered free Bibles to delegates to offer. The offer was declined with the suggestion that they be sent south to the racists who dwelt in those parts, since all the delegates already possessed their own. The bitterness which Garvey felt toward white Christianity is eloquently summed up in the Negro World editorial he wrote in 1923. Okay, the Negro is not accepting.
Diane,
Yes.
Sister Brittany had her hand up. Or Brother Najee and Sister Brittany raised their hand.
Okay,
Race First family.
go ahead,
This is
brother.
Sister Brittany.
Race
I
First.
actually have the question. I didn't know if I should interject now or if I should later on. But a couple pages ago, I saw the quote. It said Garvey did not indulge in religion in his own sake. And I'm just trying to get more clarification. Because I want to make sure as we read on, I'm understanding that part. Was he only Christian for political gain, kind of like Nzinga or like Abu Bukhari of some of the greats in our past, our ancestors, or was he Christian or what? I'm just trying to get a better understanding of that.
What the format that we've been doing is we have like questions on certain nights, and then we have the readings on certain nights. But what I would recommend is we were gonna try to do chapters what are we on 4 and possibly 5, but what we can do is just finish up with 4, and as we go through the reading, you can just make a little notation, kind of just make a little note on a question, and then we can kind of get to just bookmark the page and the question, and then at the end we can address the question. And then further, when we go over the questions next week, we'll actually have the whole hour or the whole time to actually do the questions.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, that works.
Okay. And then someone else had a question as well?
I want to say he was Catholic, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, it
As,
said
as
he had
far as
converted
religion.
to Catholicism, but I'm not sure if it stayed. I think it. I'm not sure if he was just consider himself Christian or Catholic, or if it stayed that way. But
Well, reason why I'm asking is because just based off of our ancestors, they've actually converted to or identify as a certain religion just to unify the people or political gain. Sometimes it was for trade, sometimes it was like Nzinga. When she was fighting against the Europeans, it was her against, they kind of forced her hand to become Christian, which she actually later fell in love with. So I'm just trying to figure out what was his like true understanding, like his like I'm getting some of it, but I'm kind of confused on that part. And it's kind of like, trying
yeah,
to
we
figure out if it was a political game and he
we
or if he
definitely
was,
can. Whoa,
sorry.
I'm hearing a feedback. We definitely can dissect the that that question more. You know,
Yeah, we can
we'll
just dig
probably
into that
dive.
at a later date.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. I can give a quick answer, but or whatever, this brother Mortimer, by the way. But I don't want to disrupt the process.
I would like to hear it. It's just, but I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to interrupt the process as well.
Yeah, I would say pretty much you're right. Yeah, all evidence suggested he joined the Catholic Church for political reasons. He was a Christian, but he also acknowledged that he didn't believe everything in that lying Bible. So he was a critical thinker, and he had his own spiritual belief system. But he did consider Christ the standard bearer of sacrifice and one whose life was worthy of emulation, etc. But no, he wasn't a religious nut, so to speak. And because the Catholic Church was technically the Vatican is a super city or like a super state. It has certain rights of what do you call it? Not immunity, but what do you call it? Asylum. The people can politically benefit from. So anyway, some people were making certain power moves just by affiliation. Just like Mr. Garvey was a Mason, but he really didn't go to any Masonic meetings, anything like that. But anyway, that would be from the evidence I've read over the last few decades would suggest, in my opinion.
Okay, that opens. I'm not gonna lie, that opens up many more questions. But okay, I like I said, I won't interject anymore. I'll just hold my other questions. But I definitely want to explore that further, family.
Great question, Sister Brittany. Sister Diane, you're on mute if you're speaking.
I believe she said her phone died.
Yeah, I see that now.
I can pick it back up reading.
But are we able? There's no way to scroll. That's the one thing.
I'd have to scroll for you.
Okay.
You read it, Brother John?
I would
You can
use,
scroll.
I can scroll, yes.
Okay, well, could you
We
read
were
it?
at the
Scroll.
Negro is now accepting statement.
Brother John, you want me to read it or?
Yes, please, Brother Najee.
Okay. All right, so it says the Negro is now accepting the religion of the real Christ, not the property robbing, gold stealing, diamond exploiting Christ, but the Christ of love, justice, and mercy. The Negro wants no more of the white man's religion as it applies to his race, for it is a lie and farce. It is propaganda, pure and simple, to make fools of a race and rob the precious world, the gift of God to man, and to make it the exclusive home of pleasure, prosperity, and happiness for those who have enough intelligence to realize that God made them masters of their fate and architects of their own destinies. So it says, in 1937, in similar vein, Garvey described himself as a Christian driven from the church by such actions as the Pope's blessing of Italian fascists en route to their invasion of Ethiopia, and to Black preachers who uncritically emulated their white counterparts. Garvey was equally hostile. He considered them of little help to the UNIA since they confined their activities mostly to preaching and collecting money. That's interesting. During his American period, Garvey's religious program was reinforced and often implemented by the African Orthodox Church. While the UNIA never adopted any specific religion denomination, Christian or otherwise, to the exclusion of others, the African Orthodox Church was the nearest approximation to such a state of affairs. The dominant figure in the AOC was George Alexander McGuire, also known as George Alexander, a naturalized American, once a Church of England minister in his native Antigua and elsewhere in the West Indies, and later in Episcopalian and chaplain general of the UNIA. McGuire was ordained first bishop of the AOC on September 29, 1921, by a functionary of the Russian Orthodox Church after duly being reordained and elevated to the episcopate in the American Catholic Church in order to ensure apostolic succession. The Negro world extended its congratulations to Bishop McGuire on this occasion and reminded its readers that this was in keeping with the decision of this recent convention to endorse all churches under race leadership while not allying itself with any. Bishop McGuire resigned as chaplain general of the UNIA upon his elevation to the episcopate. Despite a tiff with Garvey, which caused Bishop McGuire to become temporarily estranged from the UNIA, the AOC played an important role in disseminating Garveyism in North America, the West Indies, Africa, and elsewhere. It was Bishop McGuire who wrote the race catechism used by Garveyites, and which faithfully reproduced Garvey's and McGuire's, for they seem to have been mostly the same, ideas on religion and religious history, as well as the fundamental principles of the UNIA. Garveyites, some high-ranking, played important roles within the AOC. In 1924, for example, a former Secretary General of the UNIA became Vicar General of the African Orthodox Church. During the United Synodal Service of the Fourth General Synod of the AOC held at Harlem's Liberty Hall in 1924, Bishop McGuire conferred the honorary degree of Doctor of Civil Laws on Garvey. In 1923, with Garvey incarcerated in the Tombs prison in New York, McGuire was mentioned as a possible successor in the event that Garvey should be permanently denied bail. The AOC served as a supplementary propaganda agency for the UNIA. The Negro Churchman, its official organ, regularly promoted such Garveyite ideas as race pride, colonization in Liberia, and the like. McGuire's editorials, Ex Orient Lux, usually began, "Churchmen of African descent, greeting in Christ," which bore obvious similarity to Garvey's fellow men of the Negro race, greeting. The AOC's activities in colonized territories proved no less embarrassing to colonial authorities than those of the UNIA itself. and indeed the two were sometimes represented by the same individual. An AOC clergyman who doubled as UNIA head in Santo Domingo was reportedly deported from that country for insulting the British flag, while another, a Van Edward Sealer Salmon, was deported, according to the same source, from Trinidad to Jamaica for fomenting riots and strikes there and for stirring up workers in British Honduras against the United Fruit Company. The latter was Assistant Secretary of the Trinidad Working Men's Association. The source of this information was a renegade, AOC clergyman who took it upon himself to inform the British authorities of this church's activities. Among the gracious information thus proffered was the fact that the AOC had ordained a bishop, ostensibly of Canada, but who would in fact preside from Nova Scotia over the West Indian sections of the church. It was feared that the title Bishop of the West Indies would cause the British colonialists to prevent him from entering the islands. McGuire told the AOC branches in the West Indies to change their name if molested by the authorities, if this would allow them to carry on their work. The AOC was similarly engaged in various parts of Africa. In 1924, an application for membership was accepted from an archdeacon of Pretoria, South Africa, together with his congregation of 500. In accepting an application, Bishop McGuire is reported to have suggested that the archdeacon help effectuate Garvey's entry into South Africa, after which Bishop McGuire would consecrate him Bishop of South Africa. Shortly thereafter, from Griqualand, West, South Africa, came word that the AOC clergyman intended to go to New York to attend the next international convention and to be elevated to the episcopate by Bishop McGuire. In 1929, a branch of the AOC was begun in Uganda by Reuben Spartus Mukasa, a nationalist politician who had for some time been in correspondence with Bishop McGuire and who was also an admirer of Garvey. Okay. In 1925, McGuire summed up his religious belief in a nutshell. I believe in God. I believe in the Negro race. And even though the UNIA was not religion, he was sure that the time has come when we shall all espouse it as a great, all-comprehensive racial missionary movement, a holy cause to which every Negro should give undivided allegiance. Not unnaturally.
I'll pick up from here, brother.
Okay.
Not unnaturally, UNIA meetings were characterized by religious overtones. They featured hymns, prayers, and sometimes processions. And every unit had a chaplain. Christian festivals such as Easter and Christmas were celebrated, but in keeping with Garvey's reinterpretation of Christianity, they were turned around to the cause of Garvey's program. And the Christmas pageant at Liberty Hall in Harlem, for example, Christ was depicted as a Black child. For the period before Easter, the UNIA produced its own moving picture to replace Passion plays where the white actors portrayed God. At Easter, Garvey made his annual speech on the resurrection of the Negro. Even the Christian practice of baptism and his counterpart for the Association of Catechism stipulated that infants should be brought by their parents to be dedicated by the chaplains of their division not later than 3 months after birth, at which time they entered the general membership of the organization. Garvey, the irrepressible, not content with being a poet and playwright of liberation, turned his hand also to political hymn writing. Among his religious verses, there cropped up eventually such titles as Freeman's Noble Cause, 1834 to 1934, and lines such as Nevermore as Black footstool shall Afric's sons be sold. Garvey took his religious innovations seriously, and he and his colleagues were intolerant of religious cranks, and were attracted to the organization. The UNIA is flooded with a bunch of eccentric religious, said Negro World columnist S.A. Haynes, of a lady who complained that the organization was godless. Garvey himself expressed disagreement with Father Divine, who proclaimed himself God, and his disapproval of the Jamaican folk religion, Pacomania, was in the instance surprisingly strong. His disapproval of Jamaican prophets and prophetesses who were going to fly heavenward for the solution of the Negro problem, an apparent reference to the Jamaican prophet Bedward, whom Garvey is on occasion somewhat controversially compared. On other occasions, Garvey declared, they sent poor Bedward to the asylum, but they have a hard time to send me there. As previously stated, the UNIA refused to exclusively adopt any single Christian denomination. This reluctance to split the race among denominational lines extended to the avoidance of distinction among religions. Though he adopted Christian forms for the UNIA, Garvey considered the differences between religions such as Christianity and Islam inconsequential, since they were but different ways of worshiping God. An early copy of the preamble to the UNIA Constitution, enclosed in Garvey's correspondence to Booker T. Washington, had referred to the promoting of Christian worship. This gave way to revised version of Christian worship. This religious tolerance is interesting in the light of the rapid post-Garvey spread of Islam among African Americans. For the UNIA presented a budding Islamic movement with a sympathetic forum. This tolerance of Islam may have been indirectly due to Garvey's renowned predecessor in the cause of African redemption, Edward Wilmot Blyden. In his earliest extant pamphlet, Garvey carried a quotation from Blyden's Christianity, Islam, and the Negro Race, which occupied about half of his pages. The quotation itself dealt with peripherally with Islam, but the book from which it was taken is clear expression of Blyden's admiration for Islam, despite Blyden's being a devout Christian. Blyden's favorably attitude toward Islam had also influenced John E. Bruce. Bruce had met Blyden, who died in 1912, and had been planning a biography of him. In an address to the Boston UNIA in 1923, Bruce compared Christian and Islamic attitudes to the African race and to the detriment of the Christians. Another possible source for Garvey's tolerance towards Islam may have been due to Sayyid Muhammad Ali, who was a prominent member of the London Islamic community. At the 1922 UNIA convention, several delegates suggested that the association should adopt Islam as its official religion, since 3/4 of the Black world were Muslims, and Muslims were better than Christians. Garvey, of course, refused to legislate the matter. Some Negro world writers went so far as to occasionally compare Garvey with Muhammad. One such in 1925 compared the Prophet of Allah, concentrating on his exhaustible incandescent energy, on the spiritual material liberation of his people and the herald of the new dawn. Garvey stressing with equal zeal the material spiritual redemption of his race. Another, in a paean of praise entitled The Saying of Garvey, glorify him, ye myriad men of sable hue. Refer to him as a child of Allah. Even the organization's Universal Ethiopian Hymnal, compiled by Rabbi Arnold J. Ford, a leader of Harlem's so-called Black Jews, no less, contained a hymn, Allahu Akbar, based on African lyrics. Among the Muslims who established apparently close contact with the UNIA during Garvey's American period were adherents of the Ahmadiyya movement, a Muslim denomination founded in North India a decade or so before the end of the 19th century. In 1920, Dr. Mufti Muhammad Sadiq, a missionary from the group, arrived in the United States. He purchased property at 4448 South Wabash Avenue in Chicago, part of which was converted into a mosque, and began proselytizing by 1923. We find Sadiq among the guests in the rostrum during a Liberty Hall meeting. He had recently converted 40 Garveyites in Detroit, an area of intense Ahmadiyya effort. Sadiq returned to India in 1923 and was succeeded by Muhammad Yusuf Khan, also of India. Maulvi Muhammad Din, Sadiq's successor as editor of the Ahmadiyya movement's Muslim Sunrise, reprinted pro-Muslim letter from the Negro world, which in turn carried his discourse. Has Christianity failed and has Islam succeeded? Then appeared in the Negro world again in 1925, this time replying to a couple of editorials by T. Thomas Fortune, in which the latter disagreed with Blyden that Islam was preferable to Christianity. Fortune's arguments rested on the alleged moral superiority of monogamy over polygamy and the ease of divorce in Islam, then described as belonging to the Muslim Ahmadiyya mission, pointed out that the illegitimacy and divorce among Christians monogamous undermine editor of the Negro World favored the Muslim position, and even Fortune was by 1926 denouncing the high-handed way in which the Christian Americans and Europeans are and have been dealing with the African and Asiatic Mohammedans.
I can take over reading if you want.
Okay.
Sister Diane is back as well. She said she could take over.
Oh, okay. I yield to Sister Diane if she want me to.
Sister Diane.
Yes, okay. So possibly because of such favorable exposure in the Negro world, Islam continued to be a subject of interest among UNIA members in the United States and after Garvey's deportation. In 1931, the Cleveland, Ohio division celebrated a Mohammed Day meeting, during the course of which they were addressed by Dr. Abad M.D.C., listed as being from Northeast Africa. The Ahmadiyya Muslim apparently did not succeed in building up a mass movement, but those Muslims who did were as associated in those respect with the UNIA. It has been suggested that Elijah Muhammad, leader of the most successful of these Muslim organizations, the Nation of Islam, was a corporal in the uniform rank of the Chicago UNIA division. Others remembered him as an active member of the Detroit UNIA. Muhammad did some of the early proselytizing in Chicago in 1933 in a UNIA Liberty Hall. He also apparently encouraged, or at least did not object to having his movement cast in the role of successor to the Garvey movement. It is also sometimes suggested that Timothy Drew, later known as Noble Drew Ali, a founder in 1913 of the Moorish American Science Temple, acknowledged Garvey's influence on his movement. Drew's movement had for its major theological document a Holy Quran compounded of the teachings of the Bible. Marcus Garvey and the Quran. Garvey was apparently eulogized at every meeting as the John the Baptist of the movement. Indeed, so successful were the Moorish American at attracting Garvey's followers after his deportation that Philadelphian Garveyites actually wrote the United States authorities in 1935 asking for Garvey's return to combat the usurpation of Garvey's by those groups. The latter, the letter indicated that the Moorish American were enticing away UNIA members under the pretense that they are doing Garvey's work, as he no longer can return. The Moorish American leaders constantly reminded their converts of the injustices attendant upon Garvey's deportation, and went so far as to claim authority from Garvey. While denouncing Orthodox Garveyites as crooks who had lost contact with Garvey. So the essence of religion for Garvey was the imparting of race pride, Black nationalism, and self-reliance. In this light, he willingly tolerated Islam and the attraction he had for Muslims as not difficult to understand. Indeed, even Harlem's Black Jews could find a home in the UNIA for the basic trust of their doctrines boiled down in essentials to a similar message of the race pride and self-reliance. And in religion, Garvey was concerned primarily with essentials. Christian and non-Christian religions approved by Garvey all simultaneously predicted and worked and predicted and work had to effectuate a return of the former glories of the African race. The UNIA catechism, I say that funny, express it thus. What prediction made in the 68th Psalms and the 31st verse is not being fulfilled? Princes shall come out of Egypt, Ethiopia shall soon stretch out her hands unto God. What does this verse prove? That Black man will set up their own government in Africa with rulers of their own race. Okay, the end. So I guess, just start chapter 5. History. And if somebody wants to come in, at some point, that's fine. Okay, you assume a right to write history within the last 500 years, and simply because you have been able to dump so many tons of your history in the world and other people have not said anything by way of complaint, you think your history rests there. But a lot of things your Mr. Wells has said, we Negroes treat as bunk. Mr. H.G. Wells may divert civilization for the benefit of his Anglo-Saxon group. But that does not make it the fact that the people who laid claim to the civilization he attributed to others are going to give up easily. The Black man knows his past. It is a past of which he can be nobly proud. This is why I stand before you this afternoon, a proud Black man who would be nothing else in God's creation but a Black man. Garvey, Marcus Garvey. Out of a cold, old Europe, these white men came from caves, dens, and holes without any fame, eating their dead's flesh and sucking their blood. A relic of Mediterranean flood, literature, science, and art they stole. After Africa had measured each pole, Asia taught them what great learning was. Now they frown upon what the coolie does. Now they frown upon what the coolie does. Garvey stood.
Oh, I was gonna say, you want someone else to read, or
Yeah, sure, you can go. Yeah, go
okay?
ahead.
Garvey's study of history seems to have assumed significant proportions during his teenage years while serving his printer's apprenticeship. During this period, he interested himself largely in Black heroes of the Caribbean, of whom Toussaint L'Ouverture, leader of the Haitian Revolution, was his favorite. His early articles in the African Times and Orient Review and in Champion magazine show this keen appreciation of West Indian history. Quite possibly before he left Jamaica, he began to explore the history of Africa as well as that of Afro-America. His interest in African history was clearly stated in his early pamphlet, A Talk with Afro-West Indians. Here he commended his audience to a study of Edward Wilmot Blyden. Quote, "You who do not know anything of your ancestry will do well to read the works of Blyden, one of our historians and chroniclers, who has done so much to retrieve the lost prestige of the race and to undo the selfishness of alien historians and their history, which has said so little and painted us so unfairly." End quote. Garvey's knowledge of and appreciation for the history of his race was reinforced by many of his early contacts. Dusay Muhammad Ali was author of the well-known historical work on Egypt and the land of the pharaohs. William Henry Ferris, one of the earliest editors of the Negro World, had previously published The African Abroad. John Edward Bruce had in 1911 been among the founders of the Negro Society for Historical Research in Yonkers, New York, and was its president. This society disseminated historical knowledge and collected rare books and manuscripts on the history of Black people. The society's Pan-African thrust was symbolized by the selection of King Lewanika, I presume, of Barotseland as honorary president. Dusay Muhammad Ali was among its corresponding members, as was Marie Du Chatier of Boca del Toro, Panama, later an important UNIA organizer. It antedated by 4 years the better known Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, founded by Carter G. Woodson. The Secretary-Treasurer of the Negro Society for Historical Research was the famous historian and bibliophile Arthur A. Schomburg. Commenting on the appearance of Woodson's Journal of Negro History in 1916, Schomburg suggested that this journal was stealing our thunder, in which we are pioneer. Woodson himself, several years later, became a Negro World columnist. And among Garvey's lifelong acquaintances from his boyhood in Jamaica to his last years in England was another leading Black historian of the time, J.A. Rogers. History, like everything else for Garvey, was a subject to be used for the furtherance of racial emancipation. He used history first to establish a grievance to show that the Black man had been wrong. Many of his writings were historical in the sense. In 1938, for example, he submitted a memorandum to the West Indian Royal Commission, a British government body which was investigating recent rioting and workers' revolts in the islands. Here he traced the history of the islands since emancipation. Let me see, is that right? Yeah, since emancipation, the denial of full equality to Afro-West Indians, their resultant migrations in search of work elsewhere, the usurpation of the island economies by alien races in order to explain the recent upheaval. And last one I read. History, however, could also be used to instill self-confidence. He continually stressed the fact that the Africans had in former times enjoyed a creditable history and that this had been acknowledged by historians such as Herodotus, who belonged to an era that felt less inclined to establish myths of African inferiority. The African, therefore, had nothing to be ashamed of in the face of allegations of inferiority emanating from the white world. Indeed, Black people should move from the defensive to aggressively rehabilitate their past. Quote, "The time has come," end quote, he declared, quote, "for the Black man to forget and cast behind him his hero worship and adoration of other races and to start out immediately to create and emulate heroes of his own." We must canonize our own saints, create our own martyrs, and elevate to positions of fame and honor Black men and women who have made their distinct contribution to our racial history. End quote. Pass the mic.
Garvey's stress on the progressive nature of the Black past was a reaction to the distortion he observed emanating from the pens of white historians in his era. He therefore carried on a constant campaign against white historical writing on the Black past. In 1929, he declared that history is written with prejudices like likes and dislikes, and there has never been a white historian who ever wrote with any true love or feeling for the Negro. He continued, white historians and writers have tried to rob the Black man of his proud past in history. And when anything new is discovered to support the racist claim and attest the truthfulness of our greatness in other ages, then it is skillfully rearranged and credited to some other unknown race of people. Garvey's rehabilitation of the Black past, especially the Asian past, and his acknowledgement of the greatness of Black heroes, past and present, in no way detract from his ready admission that the Black man had fallen behind in the preceding few hundreds years in the march toward material progress. He incorporated this into a cyclical theory of history, which was designed to give the Black man hope. As in the case of all major revolutionary theories, from Christianity to communism, Garveyism decreed that the attainment of its ultimate goal was inevitable. The goal in this case being the resurgence of the Black race. In the cycle of things, he lost his position, but the same cycle will take him back to where he once was. In the tradition of these major philosophies, however, the inevitable success which awaits the Black man will have to be achieved by the Black man's own effort. In other words, success was inevitable provided the Black man did not become complacent and did not cease to engage in constant struggle based on the lines of Garvey's program. As Garvey himself expressed it, we are bound to win. Black men and women are bound to go forward. Nothing can stop them but death and themselves. This same idea was succinctly expressed by Garvey during a debate with a delegate at the 6th International Convention of Negro People of the World held in Jamaica in 1929. The exchange went like this, Mr. Garvey. You don't believe there is a literal interpretation to Ethiopia stretching forth her hand to God? Mr. Bailey, I do. Mr. Garvey, then how can we do it except we attempt it? This idea was also the central theme of Garvey's long poetic saga, The Tragedy of White Injustice, which recounted African glories at a time when Europe was steeped in barbarism and cataloging a history of European genocide and rape and rapine. It postulated the Black man's inevitable resumption of glory and held out the hope of peace if the white man should mend his evil ways soon. Otherwise, Armageddon would ensue. Garvey's interest in Black history differed in one important respect from that of some cultural nationalists to whose school of thought he is sometimes linked. For he avoided the pitfall of living in the past. He used history to establish a grievance, instill Black pride, and point a way for eventual race emancipation. And that was all. He refused to glorify in the past to the extent of letting exotism become a hindrance. Exoticism.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Letting its exoticism become an hindrance to the struggle in his own time. By 1936, he was able to say, "It is an established fact that the Negro had a glorious past. We need not worry about it now, because outside of inspiring us with confidence and hope, it will be of no material value to harp on it, for the present is what confronts us along with the future." 13 years earlier, he had expressed similar sentiments. We may go back 3,000 years ago and point to our civilization of that time, but we cannot live by the past. His interest in history was reinforced by a feeling of deep empathy with the historical sufferings of the Black race. The following expression was typical. My one purpose in life is to work for the salvation of my race because of the cries from the grave. I hear the cry of 300 years, the cry of my great-grandparents in the cotton and cane fields. I see the hard taskmaster drawing his lash across their backs. I hear them cry out in mortal agony. It pains, it pains, it pains. I see them fall under the lash. I see them fall to the ground. I see them buried. I hear the wailing souls from heaven and from regions below. I hear the cry of my mother and father and millions of Negroes who had been brutalized. Go on, Garvey, go on, go on. And so, fellow man, because of that cry that comes from the grave, I have given up all material desires. I have given up all temporal pleasures and have dedicated myself to the sacred principles of the UNIA, the emancipation of the Negro race, and a free and redeemed Africa. This communion with the past was linked to a strong consciousness on Garvey's past of himself, on Garvey's part of himself as an important historical figure. He often spoke in terms of future generations who would be inspired by his example, as well as past generations whose sufferings would thereby be rendered not in vain. Not surprisingly, history played an important role in the day-by-day affairs of the UNIA. The race catechism used by the organization was largely an encapsulation of historical knowledge concerning the race. The first of its 4 sections, religious knowledge, succinctly describe Africa in antiquity, with particular emphasis on biblical reference to Africa and Africans. The second section, historical knowledge, provided a bird's eye view of Ethiopia, Meroe, Egypt, the slave trade, New World slavery, and Africans in the Americas before Columbus. It also included brief biographical sketches of such famous historical figures as Edward Wilmot Blyden, James Africanus Horton, and Samuel Lewis of Sierra Leone, the Reverend Samuel D. Ferguson of Liberia, Conrad Reeves of Barbados, Toussaint Louverture, Frederick Douglass, Prince Hall, Alexandra Cromwell, and others. J. A. Rogers and Arthur A. Schomburg sometimes lectured to UNIA on local Black history, and Rogers from Superman to Man was offered as a bonus with subscription to the Negro World. Carter G. Woodson's Association for the Study of Negro Life and History was favorably reported by the paper's writers, and Woodson himself had actually taken the initiative in writing Garvey's requesting permission to publish in his paper. Woodson had similarly amicable relationship with Garvey's Harlem-based daily paper, the Daily Negro Times. John E. Bruce, who worked on this paper, was a friend of Woodson and sometimes plugged Woodson's historical effort in his regular column appearing in the paper. As early as 1920s, the Declaration of Rights had demanded that Black history had be taught in schools. And when the organizations obtained Liberty University in Virginia, it was envisaged that this subject would be taught truthfully for juvenile readers of the Negro world, the lives of famous Black figures such as entertainers, Bert Williams and heavyweight boxing Brother John, and heavyweight boxing champion Jack Johnson was serialized in comic strips form. Black Star Line ships were named after Black heroes, as were Phyllis Wheatley's Hotel and the Booker T. Washington's University booth in Harlem. This interest in the race history was not confined to Afro-American Garveyites. Garvey himself was a collector of African art pieces, and on occasion, we find himself spending an afternoon with Professor William Leo Hansberry at the latter's Howard University office, reviewing pictures of ancient Ethiopian culture. An important feature of Garvey's makeup, which was illustrated by his use of history, was the deep feelings of humanity. He took the view that great civilizations in the past were destroyed by materialism and a submergence of human values, and he looked forward to an ideal society which would learn from their past mistakes. In this regard, he saw a chance for a Black man to be humanity's savior. For the Black man has the double experience of his own ancient civilization on the Nile as well as the white man's in which he currently lived. In which he currently lived. The former had been destroyed by materialism and feelings of racial superiority. The latter was in the process of disintegration for the same reason. In this situation, the Black man could not only emancipate himself, but could perhaps save mankind in the process and salvage the bankrupt civilization of white Europe. He could do this because the heart of the Negro is deep and holy. Misdirected, it has been emotional and sentimental up to the present. But the recovery of the race in its sublimest thought will give it an urge directed toward an end that will bestow great blessings upon mankind. Should we stop or continue?
I would
We got,
give a chance for some discussion if there's any.
okay. Okay, so we'll pick up on chapter 6 next week, and we will go over some in-depth questions for where we've gotten to tonight so far. But if anyone have questions or things that, any questions, comments, concern on what we've covered tonight in the reading, please feel free to express. We have until 10 o'clock. So please express away, absolutely. But, as I said, next week we'll get into more details. It'll just be mainly questions. And then if time permits, we'll jump on chapter 6. So I know Sister Najee.
Well, that's Brother Najee and Sister.
I'm sorry.
Sister Brittany. Yeah, so I'm going to kind of I'm writing down a list of questions, just kind of I'm just gonna just present them next week, so I can kind of so I can sit there and process everything that was said today.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, excellent. Anyone else wanted to comment on any of tonight's reading? Question, comments, concern, feedback?
Well, I thought a couple things. I thought the first chapter, chapter 4, I thought was pretty interesting how it was explicit of, I don't know if we want to say Garvey's tolerance or admiration of Islam. But they made it clear that, there was no animosity between what Garvey's form of Christianity and Islam. So I thought that was interesting. The other chapter, history, the thing I pulled from that I thought was interesting was how Garvey was basically saying, and sometimes we talk about it, don't romanticize, the movement and what it is that we're doing. There was some greatness in the past. We want to duplicate or emulate that greatness, but it's not just pageantry. We're not just doing this, for show. There has to be some serious progress and some serious work being done as we honor our history. So those couple things I thought was very interesting, and I'm looking forward to re-reviewing these 2 chapters.
Likewise. So he stresses the importance of history, and we saw that many institutions were set up and for history to be taught. But I think he was saying not to dwell in history, but to learn of our glorious past, so to speak, to learn the truth, because we have to tell our story. But he was also talking about the importance of the present and the future, the present, to be in the now, and then the future, because the future, the generations of the future was going to be the people we, pass the baton to, so to speak, that's going to follow in our footsteps, so to speak.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment also, if I may.
You're a little bit low,
ahead.
brother.
I'm a
Mark.
little low. Oh, okay. Let me see something. Yeah. Okay. Let me see.
By history?
Can you hear me any better?
Yes,
Slightly,
yes,
yeah.
Hello.
yes.
Oh,
We can
okay,
hear
okay,
you.
yeah. I wanted to. Speaking of that quotation, Mr. Garvey made that, 'cause I remember reading it in the Negro World. Actually, it was he was saying that we can't. He said that we should learn from the past, but we can't live in the past. And he made the argument: if you think you can live in the past, I want you to eat some food today and don't eat again until next Tuesday, and see how much you can live off of the food from your past. So as I always say, you can't count yesterday's points on today's scoreboard. We gotta let the past inspire us, and then move beyond it, and actually, use the lessons from the past to build upon. But I thought it was interesting too, as he was covering certain other entities. The Dr. Tony Martin was talking about Carter G. Woodson. I know he was a big fan of Dr. Carter G. Woodson, but I'm not so much a big fan of Dr. Carter G. Woodson's relationship with Mr. Garvey. But that's something, like I said, we maybe talk about a little bit more later, because Carter G. Woodson actually was not only a member of the Boule, which was possibly political. He was a member of the Epsilon branch, the Boule in Washington, D.C., but he was also a member of the Garvey Must Go campaign. He was one of the board members of the Friends of Negro Freedom, which I think that's going to talk about in a later chapter. But so anyway, and also Mr. Garvey was talking, and what we believe, we were talking about teaching Negro history to Negro children to their benefit long before the Declaration actually was ratified, for doing such. We were touting those same historical things long before Woodson published his Miseducation and other books. It came out first through the Negro World. So, Mr. Garvey was definitely one of the early pioneers and advocates of history that isn't often given due credit. So anyway, that was just, something I was thinking about as I was listening and hearing some things. Definitely and I also always appreciated Mr. Garvey's understanding of what he calls the divine injunction. He was able to utilize his philosophy to trump some of the religious interpretation of certain religious leaders in his day, who were teaching, certain things, but they weren't teaching in a way that was conducive to our prosperity and our development. So Mr. Garvey was able to understand the interpretation of a religious book, is stronger than just the book itself. So if you can take an overarching theme like the being fruitful and becoming many, having your own vine and fig tree, and say, well, if God created Europe for the Europeans and Asia for the Asians, and Asians run their country, Europeans run their country, why isn't Africa ran by Africans? And so it's part of a divine injunction that the Almighty gave us, and that we forfeited that by allowing them to come over in our territory and take from us, what was ordained by God for us. So it's our divine right to go back there and reclaim and reestablish, some sovereignty in our own land. But these, the way that he taught his philosophy through their spiritual mandate was just beautiful, the way he done it. And even with the concept of the black God, which Tony Martin talked about, Professor Kelly Miller having some objection to it. But later on, he actually went over Mr. Garvey in a few articles after the one that he quoted from Kelly Miller. I did quite a bit of research on the UNIA at Howard University. But anyway, but also Mr. Garvey's argument, when people would ask him that question about the blackness of God, people would ask him, how is God black? He's supposed to be invisible. And Mr. Garvey would agree with him and say, you're absolutely right. They said, hold up, but you just said he was black. How is he black if he's invisible? And that's when Mr. Garvey told him the law of anthropomorphology. is that it's only natural for the human to see the divine through human attributes. So if the Bible, the writers of the Bible talks about, the world is in his hand. A hand is a physical attribute. It's not a claw or a fin or, it's a human attribute. They talk about irritating and touching the eye of God and, embracing him. He'll embrace you in his bosom or his chest. So if you're going to talk about the divine through these human attributes, then you should see those, you should imagine those attributes looking like you since you were made in his image. So in that way, even though we do acknowledge him being invisible and unseen, but we do imagine someone favoring us because we were made in his image. So anyway, he argued and shut folks down and made them look stupid as much as they tried to make him seem so absurd and so unreasonable and etc. Mr. Garvey took so many to task. The boys were scared to death to debate him. All the intellectuals and scholars at that time were running scared with Mr. Garvey and his whole team. So anyway, that's another whole subject. But yeah, I love those two chapters.
Thank you,
Yes.
Moria.
Yes, this is Aziza. I just have a quick question. What happened to the Black Star?
The Black Star Line?
Yes, what happened to this beautiful ship?
I think there were a total of three ships, and I think Brother Mariama or Brother John might.
Yeah. Well, a lot of things happened to the ships. Well, one is, there were three, and there was a down payment on the fourth, and eventually, it was a lot of legal, actions being taken, forged by enemies of the Garvey movement that actually ruled that the ships were, worthless, and that Mr. Garvey was selling worthless stock. But first the ship, they had all the ships had different problems. It was like the FBI agents were throwing metal objects in the engines, trying to ruin them after they were professionally fitted. People like W.B. Du Bois was going around saying ships are made of wood and you're going to fall, in the ocean to your death if you get on the ships, and people were scared to get on them. You had, FBI agents who were working actually in the Black Star shipping line office as the circulation manager, Agent 800, aka James Wormley Jones or Jack Jones. He was actually the circulation manager, and he deliberately or allegedly sent a letter, a premature flyer for the ship that they had a down payment on, but didn't actually own. They had to get it approved by the shipping board, and the FBI or the Bureau of Investigation had deliberately told the shipping board to hold up the process of approving of the ship so that they could delay while they had that guy in the office. So anyway, they were deliberately working to sabotage the Black Star Line so that when the letter went out saying that we have the fourth ship, the SS Phyllis Wheatley, then that was false advertising because you technically didn't have it operating yet. So basically what the FBI agent did was send it directly to an FBI paid informant named Benny Dancy. And so the ships were, one of the ships anyway was taken, and the boys later tried to steal it from the UNIA by going to the State Department and seeing if they would give it over to him like a snake. But anyway, but one of the ships, Shady Side, unfortunately, while it was sitting in the winter, while it was docked, it was one of the vessels we want to have on the rivers, a river, not an ocean going vessel. But anyway, it eventually had some problems, and it was a good ship. It was waiting to be fixed after the winter. The winter was a little harsh, and somehow the ice and something happened to the ship.
I think you're muted, brother.
Oh, can you hear me now?
You talk about the ice and then you kind of went muted a bit.
Yeah, that was somebody was calling my phone.
Okay.
Yeah, but anyway, like they was sitting on the winter, it was docked at a certain location on the and the winter was particularly harsh. So anyway, it ruined the ship, and it sank, and it cost too much to recover it, and they were giving them docking, fees, fines, etc. So anyway, different things happened to different ships. Some people tried to crash them. Excessive fines were being levied against them. all over the place. It was all kinds of things that was going wrong. But despite a lot of the sabotaging, the fact that the shipping line lasted as long as it did for those few years, is amazing in and of itself. Because had that been my shipping line, they would have got me with a metal object in the engine. It would, I wouldn't have got so far. But Mr. Garvey, and despite other things with the shipping, the purchasing agent trying to get a kickback on, buying the ships at a price beyond what they were worth, etc. So anyway, it was a lot of little, lying and deception and sabotaging going on. But even after that, Mr. Garvey was able to develop another shipping line, the Black Cross Trade Navigation Company. Unfortunately, he got locked up and things didn't go as they planned after that. But he was able to secure even a bigger ship with the SS Guethels, General Guethels, later to be named the Booker T. Washington. So, but yeah, it was it was a lot of good effort. And at that time, a lot of other shipping lines were suffering tremendously, far worse than the Black Star Line. You know about the White Star Line and the Titanic and other ships that had challenges. A lot of ships were being sold during that time because of the World War, and they had kind of produced too many, and a lot of the older ones were being sold, and people were trying to get into the industry. But it was anyway, a lot of challenges like that.
And thank you for that, brother.
Yeah.
Mariama. And as we get deeper into the book, there is actually a whole section that just chronicles all the ups and downs and attempt to sabotage the shipping line. And I'm still like mind boggled at why would any of us, I can understand outsiders, but why would any of us, get into a situation where we're sabotaging this movement? It's still mind boggling, but throughout history, there's always a coon or whatever that tried to stop the movement or try to sell us out for 30 pieces of silver. But as Brother Murray Mar says, Garvey persevered, and things could have gotten better had he not been deported. But
sorry, I have two questions about that. I heard him say we. I'm just trying to figure out who is we.
No, I say we. When I'm saying we like us, the race, the Black people. We could have gotten further had it not been so many attempts to sabotage just that alone, because there are many businesses, but just the shipping line alone would have been crucial to merging, Africans in the diaspora and Africans on the African continent, Africans at home and Africa abroad, Africa for the Africans. That would have been something that helped to cement the unity. Had it not been for this various sabotage. Does that clarify, or you were asking along the line of something else?
I was actually referring in regards to the statement that was made about the FBI and things like that. My second question was also where are we getting that text from? Like, where are we getting that information? Is it from a certain book, or somewhere that you could kind of look that up?
Brother Murray Amara was shedding some light on that. I think
Brother
she was.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just have to wait for a second. I kind of heard some of what Sister just said. You said, what about the FBI? And
nah, I just had two questions. I heard you say we, when it came to we're talking about the Black Star ships, and right. You said we, you said the FBI, and then I heard you say DeBose. Are you referring to DeBose working with the FBI, and also where would this information come from?
Yeah, there's a lot of sources for the FBI records of that. I mean, Robert Hill's bound volume collection has some of the documents. I could probably forward you, some of the letterheads with, James Rumley Jones, circulation manager, etc. You probably had to go through the court records to look at the testimony of Benny Dancy, which you can get from the National Archives site. There's also a book that may have a detailed discussion and some citations dealing with it by Theodore Cornweeble called Seeing Red, but it talks heavily about the beginning of the Bureau of Investigation and Hoover's investigation of the Garvey movement. They were scared that Black nationalists were going to connect with the Red Scare going on back at that time. So they, this white guy actually out of California, that did a lot of investigating. He brought a lot of documents by Freedom of Information Act to look at who was doing what and et cetera, et cetera. But any one particular thing, I mean, I can, like I said, if you got in touch with me, I can give you any specific information. But there was a lot of things combined that created that situation. There's another book on the Black Star Line. I haven't finished reading it though, by a lady named Ramla Bandeli. I can't, vouch for its accuracy, but I've read some of her works, and so far I wasn't thrilled with it. But it had some information that she may have done some research that I haven't exhausted. But there's a lot of sources for the information on that that's available. And even if you look at Mr. Garvey's whole appeal is in Justice. Why was justice defeated? If you look at the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey, he talks about some of his arguments there that may speak to. He didn't speak too much to the Agent 800 infiltration and that sort of thing, but Cornweeble definitely covers a huge swath of information dealing with Agent 800's involvement, and a lot of reports again are in the Hill papers and the certain volumes dealing. Because the funny thing about Agent 800 is he actually joined through the Virginia. He was a DC police officer and went to the military and became a captain during World War I. Came back to DC as a police officer, and they made him start from the beginning, whereas before he was a mounted, troop and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, he was kind of disgruntled with the police department, and so this is the time the Garvey movement was on the rise in 1919. So they sent him to Virginia to the longshoreman who was having beef, the black longshoreman having beef with white folks. And anyway, so when they sent him over there, he connected with a few of the officers in the UNIA, the Legionnaires, and they liked him because he had high military rank. So he helped put together the Legionnaire manual and all this stuff. Eventually, they sent him to headquarters, where he had got discovered at the 1920 convention because some people from DC had came up and saw him and said, "Oh, this guy's a government agent." Well, not a government agent; they called him a officer, law enforcement officer, or something. Anyway, so they kicked him out of the UNIA, and then a few months later, when Mr. Garvey left the country to go on a speaking tour, the FBI, along with the State Department, denied him a visa to come back into the country for 5 months. And during that time, FBI agent Jones got back in the organization and claimed that was his brother and it wasn't him, and the guy mistaken him for the wrong person. So he got back in, and that's when he did the damage of sending that letter out to the FBI informant. And that's what, even though it was an empty envelope, it actually convicted Mr. Garvey. It's just the testimony of the informant, who didn't acknowledge to the court that he was an informant. Just his testimony saying what the letter had in it, that it was an advertisement for the about Phyllis Wheatley, was enough to get the conviction and 5 years in jail and the court costs and $1,000 fine and all that kind of ridiculous stuff. But yeah, a lot of that's all over the place. So there may be some easier places to find it, but it's looking at race first and just looking at some of the citations dealing with the Black Star Line would probably be a decent start. But if there's anything in particular, I can dig it up because I've cited a lot of stuff myself in some of the books I've been working on.
Okay. Thank you so much for that information. I sent our email in the chat. If you can just give us kind of a start point. We're still kind of digging deep into Garvey, but definitely want to understand a little bit more, but especially with this book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I would agree with Brother Moriama. It's a lot of information, but it's fairly scattered. There's not a great central source. Our central source that we try to promote, I'm sure you're aware of, New Marcus Garvey Library. But even that resource, well, it includes UNIA paper, so as well as philosophies and opinions. So those were the ones that caught my attention, that I'm actually aware of. I haven't done as much research as Brother Moriama, but UNIA papers by Robert Hill, Philosophies and Opinions, I believe volume 2. Mr. Garvey has some letters there that specifically touch on his trial, and what was going on in his trial. And as we're showing here, the notes section to the Race First chapters. Those would also be additional resources that I would encourage.
Thank you.
Welcome, no problem. Can you send it to us, please? Okay, that's Moriama. Got a request in the chat. Sister Diane, 957.
Yes. So, yes, Brother Moriama, if you can send us the source, that'll help for some of us who want to dive a little deeper in understanding the court case and just, diving deeper into Garvey. So yes, for sure, that would be great. And does anyone else have anything to add? Any questions, comments, concerns?
Yes. Woodson. Wasn't Woodson at some point, brief point, or not? Wasn't he a editor of the Negro World?
Hmm.
No, I'm sorry. No, he wasn't the editor. He even Tony Martin mentions him as a columnist. I can't say for sure that he was a columnist, but he in the later, like, well, let me say this way. Mr. Garvey was in 1929 formed a new UNIA in Jamaica, at which time he began to publish 1930 the Black Man magazine, which continued like up to 1937, 38. But at that time, the Negro World still operated up until 1933, and so up until 31, Mr. Garvey would, kind of connect himself with the Negro World, but he really wasn't connected with it. And that was around 31, 32 is when Woodson came in and would, he was kind of befriending a few of the editors. He was tight with some of the early editors like John Edward Bruce and others, but he was closer with the Indian guy who was, what's his name, Hushwar G. Mutgal was the editor back in the last couple years of the Negro World's existence. But anyway, during that time, when Mr. Garvey had kind of disassociated himself from the paper formally, that's when Woodson would write more articles. So you will see one or two that was written in other newspapers that were syndicated in the Negro World. But then you would see a few articles that were part of the some early pages of the Miseducation of the Negro came out in the Negro World regularly. So I mean, temporarily, I guess he was a columnist, but not really. Definitely wasn't an editor in any capacity ever.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. He was a contributor, but never an editor.
Yeah, in fact, the editor, one of the editors, Mutgal, got sick of him at one point because back in 1922, Woodson had been asked by the Crusader magazine, which was owned by A. Philip Randolph and Chandler Owen. They had queried a bunch of black leaders at the time and asked them of their opinion of Marcus Garvey. This was right before the 1923 infamous letter by 8 Negroes to the Justice Department, asking them to investigate Garvey for all kinds of crazy stuff. But in December 22, they asked Woodson about what he thought of Mr. Garvey and should he be deported and arrested and all this stuff. And Woodson's answer back in 1922 was, well, I don't know really a lot about the man, so I can't really give a fair estimation of what I think of anything concerning Marcus Garvey. So 10 years later, where the whole world knew Mr. Garvey, even knew him back then. And this is, Woodson, who had been writing for years about people he had never met before. He had an opinion about Nat Turner. He had an opinion about Shaka Zulu. He had an opinion about everybody in the world in his Negro journal that he was putting out. So, anyway, they asked him 10 years later, and I think it was 31, 32, what he thought about Marcus Garvey. He gave the same jive answer. Well, I really don't know enough about the man to give an opinion. So the editor lit him up and was just criticizing him for being a coward and not coming up with his real opinion because he didn't want to lose some of the money he was getting from some of these colored intellectual connections he had. So he wanted to play the Negro role at the same time. He was critical of a lot of the people in his, the peers or his colleagues in his camp. So he was straddling the fence a little too much for their taste. but Woodson is an interesting cat to be discussed in and of himself at some point. He's smart, genius in a lot of ways, but he wasn't the bravest soul, I would say, of his day.
Thank
Wow.
you.
Wow. Thank you for that. Thank you, everyone, for such wonderful sharing. That was great. Does anyone else have anything to add, as it is now 10 o'clock and we get ready to close out? Any last minute questions, comments, concerns?
Just a beautiful historical review of Garvey. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Brother John, if no one else has anything to add, we can move to close, and or we could follow the format last week where Brother Mariama closed us out. I think it was a song or a prayer. I'm trying to.
Yeah, it was a song last time. Mm-hmm. Well, I can do that if you like. Since we were talking about Islam, I can sing to our honorable president, John Hargrove, the God Bless Our President.
Okay, that sounds good to me.
All right. Father of all creation, Allah omnipotent, supreme over every nation, God bless our president. Supreme over every nation, God bless our president. Guide him through life victorious, save him from accident. Grant him his aims most glorious, God bless our president. Grant him his aims most glorious, God bless our president. The tyrant's wiles shall never our homes asunder rent. The red, black, and green forever, God bless our president. The red, black, and green forever, God bless our president. One God, our firm endeavor, one aim most glorious bent, one destiny forever, God bless our president. One destiny forever, God bless our president. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you for that. That was beautiful. And Brother John, if you want to close us out with our motto.
Sure. Yeah, I want to just thank you, Sister Diane, for continuing to host our education court group and working through Race First. Very informational for me. I'm learning a lot. So just wanted to thank you for continuing to take the lead on this Tuesday program. And thank you to the readers as well. That's very helpful. Reading, a couple paragraphs. Everybody that contributed, thank you very much. So we'll close out. If everyone would please put your black fist in the air. Repeat after me. One God.
One
One
God,
God,
One aim.
one
One
aim,
aim,
One destiny.
one
one
destiny.
One
destiny.
destiny.
Africa
Africa,
Africa,
Africa.
for the Africans.
For the
for
for
the
the
Africans,
The
Africans,
Africans,
African.
Those at home
those at home,
those
Those
at
at
home,
home.
and those abroad.
and
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 those
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 abroad.
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 Race First family, go in peace.
Race first.
Race
Right.
first.
And love, everyone. One love. Until next time.